radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 20, recorded on Thursday, January 14th from Milwaukee. I am Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we'll examine freedom of speech and big tech. But first, the headlines.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake, disgusting news.
Up first in headlines, some updates on the Ku Klux Klan. Jason, I'm loving this pun you have here. You guys can't see it, but he spelled coup like an actual coup, like C-O-U-P.
Certainly can't take credit for starting that one.
I love it.
I've also seen it as Ku Klux Klan,
Ha.
which is pretty good. So Donald Trump has become the first president to be impeached twice.
That is correct, with a House vote of, well, barely more than what should have happened, I guess. The Democratic-run House officially impeached Donald Trump for inciting a violent strike against the Capitol.
10 Republicans who voted yay, and every Democrat voted yay as well.
So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that was higher than what you expected, lower than what you expected? Were you surprised at all?
I knew it would pass. It's a little lower than what I would have expected for only 10 out of, however 100 Republicans are in the House. I would have expected a little bit higher just because at least right after that happened at the Capitol, it was, these were the people that were cowering in fear under desks and barricaded behind doors as people were trying to smash windows and climb through. You would have thought that they would grow a spine at this point and decide that they've had enough with Trump and all of his fanatics, but apparently not.
Well, I also read a report, and I can't remember which representative it was, but it was a Democratic representative from Colorado that said that several Republican representatives told him they wouldn't vote for impeachment, but they didn't because they were actually afraid of the threats from their families if they would have done so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, and I just want to clarify this. If you're a part of the party where your own supporters may kill your family if you don't vote their way, you should go to a different party. Just my suggestion, though.
Or maybe vote to actually have consequences when they do act violently. That would maybe make sense.
Parties are not the same, promise you. Jesus Christ.
I've also heard that there's some allegations that some of the Republican lawmakers may have assisted in the Capitol riots.
Oh, are you talking about, was it Colorado's Boebert?
Well, she was
one of them.
Yeah, she was tweeting out like live updates while they were locked down. Like, we're currently locked in secure rooms. The Speaker of the House has been escorted out. Just in case everybody didn't know where Nancy Pelosi was at the time.
Right, and even though representatives have all said they were explicitly told not to do that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, she's not a reporter where your reflex would be to let everybody know what's going on. She's a crazy conspiracy theory Republican, and the Capitol was under assault by crazy conspiracy theory Republicans. There were also reports that Ayanna Pressley's office, when they went in there, they found the panic buttons were ripped out. They don't know when that happened. Certainly an odd thing. Also, Jim Clyburn was in an unmarked office that he uses, even though he does have an office that's marked with his name.
Oh yeah, this one scared me, where they bypassed his marked office to go find him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that one really scared me.
There are some indications that a lot of these people knew maybe a little bit more than they should have. There were also some reports and some concerns that were brought up of the days leading up to this, that even though the Capitol is closed for tours, that Republican lawmakers were giving private tours to people, and they thought that it should be investigated to see if any of those people were also involved in the riot.
Which is just insane to even think about.
Yeah, and that's something that I would normally say would be a thing, but there are a lot of reports, and these are reports coming from senators and congressmen, so they should be investigated.
And due to the crazy riot and insurrection that took place, there are now new security procedures for members of Congress at the Capitol building, which Republicans have not stopped whining about. As of right now, they're going through new metal detectors specifically for members of Congress, which they're usually allowed to skip or walk around, and also pat downs as well.
Several Republican members of Congress grew angry on Tuesday over the new security systems implemented at the Capitol. You are creating a problem you do not understand the ramifications of. Republican Steve Womack of Arkansas was heard yelling at police who were conducting the check, according to a press pool report. He warned that the security check was going to create chaos during busy hours on the floor when members of Congress were streaming through to vote. I don't know about you, Joe, but I had to go through metal detectors at my high school, and we managed.
And I don't know about you, Jason, but I've heard a lot of Republicans talk about metal detectors when we brought up school shootings all the time.
Yeah, why don't they arm all of the, I don't know, are there teacher equivalents in Congress? There needs to be some adults there.
I mean, you can't say the members of Congress because they will, like, half of them will literally carry, like, AR-15s.
Well, they're the kids in this scenario, so we need somebody who's, maybe they're aides.
How about just Nancy Pelosi? Nancy Pelosi, just strap her the hell up, give her some really cool stuff, make her look like a badass, and then, I don't know.
Get her like a Desert Eagle, something that's going to rip her arm off.
Yeah, right. And Representative Lauren Boebert, the same representative who was tweeting out the location and play-by-plays that we talked about before, had a nice standoff with Capitol Police because she refused to let them look in her bag because she was the one who said that she was dedicated to bringing her pistol into the Capitol building.
I remember she ran an ad.
Yep.
Where she had a Glock in her back pocket and like, oh, I'm going to take the fight to Washington. Where was she during the insurrection? I don't remember her standing at the front lines with the Capitol Police.
Yeah, she was a good guy with the gun, right?
Yeah, why didn't she hold everybody off single-handedly with her gun?
So Miss Boebert, Karen's like no one could ever Karen before, screaming until she eventually, like all other Karens, gave up and submitted to the rules.
Good on Capitol Police for actually holding her to the rules. That's actually surprising.
And Jason, this one's my absolute favorite. Representative Ronnie Davis of Illinois was also quoted saying, "This is political correctness run amok."
Making them go through metal detectors.
Making them go through metal detectors is political correctness.
Like we all have to do at the airport after 9/11.
What is wrong with these people?
9/11. I don't know.
They're angry that they have to go through extra security after there was a literal insurrection that took place, more than the fact that an actual insurrection took place. Like, what needs to happen for these people to care about anything?
They're more worried about personal convenience than they are about safety.
It's freaking ridiculous, man.
And just the fact that they're going to yell at these people a week after they were all traumatized and had to decide whether or not they were going to murder people. And they're just trying to do their jobs. And these representatives are giving them a hard time and screaming at them. And that's a thank you for defending their lives, which is what they did last week. Real servants of the people they are. I did hear reports that up to 15,000 National Guard members will be in D.C. for the inauguration, as well as many state capitals are preparing for potential violence, including our own in Madison. I saw they were boarding up all the windows.
Yep.
And they were also getting the Wisconsin National Guard ready to defend the State House.
And again, Republicans are nowhere to be found.
We are...
The law and order party is nowhere to be found when there's right-wing terrorism run amok.
We are having to put armed guards at all of our state capitals to defend against Trump fanatics. That is crazy.
So where we stand right now is Trump is the only president to ever been impeached more times than he has been elected, which is amazing. He will most likely not be convicted in the Senate, as we do need a 2/3 vote. We're looking at, 17 Republicans we need for a conviction?
Yeah, and they're going to put, 17. And they're going to put it off until after the inauguration anyway, which that'll kill.
McConnell did say that he was going to push off as long as he could.
So even with that tie-breaking majority that they have, they would need 17 Republicans to join in. And they'll get some. They'll get a handful, like 5. But I don't think they'll get the 17. That's just too many. There's too many people that know that if they turn on Trump, then his supporters, which seem to be a majority of the GOP base right now, are not going to vote for them.
Well, let's think about like this, where you're going to need, if we have like 5 people like the Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski's of the Senate, so we have 5 of those, But then we're going to need the left to be like Liz Cheney in the House, where she's from a super red district, very conservative, but just had enough and actually spoke up for the good of the country. We need 12 more Liz Cheneys.
That's one thing that bothered me watching the impeachment hearing. I don't need to defer to Republicans to have any kind of awareness of what's at stake and what is justified. I didn't like that they kept bringing even Liz Cheney, my friend Liz Cheney, the Honorable Liz. Who cares what she says? I don't care. I know what happened, and I know that it's not behavior that is acceptable of anyone, let alone a president, and is something that definitely stands the test of impeachment.
Well, and this may be a good way to segue into Trump's message that he recently released about calling for peace. He actually no true Scotsman to his own fan base. Did you see that?
Yeah. No real Trump fan would commit violence. No
Right.
real Trump fan would go against law enforcement.
And same thing like with Liz Cheney and other Republicans, where I feel, I'm glad he did it. Don't get me wrong, because if he didn't, it would be so much worse. But the damage is done. Like, he did all the wrong things up until this point. And the fact that he puts out some little safety or, let's be peaceful message now, that doesn't do anything for us. That doesn't help us at this point.
And reports were that he was forced to do it.
Oh, I'm sure he was. He looked like a damn prisoner in the video.
Yeah.
He's going through Twitter withdrawal. Are you kidding me?
And that seemed to be what his focus was. He didn't talk about impeachment, but he definitely focused on his freedom of speech being taken away.
Well, and reports from the White House are also saying that outside of that little video, he's still screaming at his admin staff. He's still screaming about Giuliani. He's still screaming about Mike Pence.
Reports are that he's not going to be paying Giuliani.
Yep.
Which is, that's always what Trump does. He always doesn't pay the bill.
And he's still going around saying that he won, according to reports inside the White House.
Well, look at how many people were at his rally. Of course he won. That proves everything, right? How many Biden rallies did you go to, Joe?
If Georgia just found those 11,700 some votes, he would have
lost.
He would have lost less.
So let's say that go to fantasy world and say he is impeached. Now, I've been hearing over and over again.
Well, he is impeached.
Well, okay, that he is convicted.
Okay.
In the Senate. We'll say that he is convicted in the Senate, even though
fantasy world. He is
that we don't think that will happen, but we'll say that he is convicted. I've been hearing over and over again that one of the reasons to do that would be so that he can't run in 2024.
Correct.
The problem is that is not automatically included in impeachment.
Correct.
That has to be specifically added as a condition of impeachment. And if you want proof of that, there is a current House representative, Alcee Hastings of Florida, who was a federal judge and was impeached for taking a $150,000 bribe to give somebody a lenient sentence, and also committed perjury when testifying about that. And he later became a representative from Florida. And he is a Democrat, by the way, Joe. So there's our balanced reporting.
Hooray.
Democrats can also be terrible people.
No, what? Would have never have guessed.
And also, one thing for everyone, and just as you see this literal attack on the Capitol by fanatical supporters of a populist, right-wing, white nationalist president, that also states across the country are preparing for potential violence. Even if, we'll say, best case scenario, Trump is convicted, his pension is taken away, he doesn't have paid Secret Service, he doesn't have paid assistance in office, all of the perks that come along with being a former president, he loses all of that. And I'll even give you, he is criminally convicted in Georgia and goes to jail. That doesn't mean all of this is going to go away. All of his supporters are going to see the light. They're all going to go back to being normal citizens again. They're not going to want to violently overthrow the government anymore. And I know, Godwin's law notwithstanding, I want to talk a little bit about Hitler and Nazi Germany. The beer hall putsch, which a lot of people are actually comparing the Capitol riot to, which was in 1923, I believe, in Germany, was a failed violent overthrow of the government by the Nazis and by Hitler.
And Hitler did go to jail for that.
And he went to jail. He was imprisoned. It was supposed to be for 5 years. I believe he only served about a year before being pardoned. And then he became the leader of the Nazi party, or stayed the leader of the Nazi party. And they took over power in Germany 10 years after the Beer Hall Putsch. So in 1933. So just because this failed, this coup attempt failed, doesn't mean we're out of danger yet. Doesn't mean we can just forget about the Boogaloo Boys and...
So you're telling me in 10 years, the QAnon shaman is going to be our new president?
I wouldn't be terribly surprised.
Don't say that. No. Be very surprised.
Well, at least he wouldn't host dinners at the White House with McDonald's and Wendy's. I don't think that's organic. But yes, it's something that we're going to... This was an attempt to violently overthrow the government based on lies from a charismatic totalitarian dictator wannabe. We've seen that we are susceptible to that. As a country, people will believe literally anything. We have to be vigilant. And no matter what happens with this impeachment and with Trump, it's not going to just go away.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and that's the same stuff we talked about like in our previous episodes, that just because you cut off the head at the snake, that doesn't mean the whole thing's going to fall apart, right? This is going to go on for a long time, and we have a lot of these people to deal with for decades. So, Jason, one thing I want to talk to you about, and I'm sure you probably have seen this before, but the biggest talking point with these riots, or specifically with the Capitol riot from conservatives, is that you usually hear, well, what about all the BLM riots? You weren't upset then, so what gives now? So what are your thoughts on comparing these two types of riots?
Well, I think the most important thing to look at is motivation. Now, I'm never in favor of smashing things and burning things down and killing people to prove a point, especially if your point is there needs to be less violence and less brutality in the world. I think you are kind of losing the point if you're going to use violence in order to make the world more peaceful. So that, like, just as a blanket.
Well, and for me, I think that's step one, and I was talking to Dan about this, and for those who don't remember, Dan was the guy that co-hosted a few episodes ago, and I told him that at the end of the day, I can respect and understand the actual rioting that happened during the Black Lives Matter marches, but I don't have to endorse them or even approve of them. So for me, at least, a riot is a riot, and I completely agree that we don't want to live in a society where riots are very common things to happen. So even though I can understand, and I think we can understand what's going on, we can also not dismiss the anger that's built up from all these systemic issues over time, but still condemn the violence that actually happened because of it. What are your thoughts?
I agree. And the motivation is to raise awareness and stop the overuse of force and carelessness that law enforcement seems to have when dealing with minorities. That's why it's called Black Lives Matter. They're just asking to be treated like human beings and to not be murdered in public for potential counterfeiting or
selling cigarettes,
selling loose cigarettes, or trying to find shelter in the rain,
or just being at the house at the wrong time.
Yeah, even things that are legitimate crimes, like Jacob Blake, right? He had a warrant out for his arrest, needed to be arrested, was going to be arrested, no need to be paralyzed.
Correct.
So because of those things, I can understand the motivation there. This needs to stop. It happens all too often. We only know about the ones that there's video of and that, make the news. And we really know about them because of these protests. Without these protests, would we know? We would know probably about Jacob Blake because it happened here, but would we know who Breonna Taylor was? Would we know who George Floyd was without the unrest, without the protests? Probably not. So I understand the motivation. When it comes to the Capitol riot, what was the motivation there? That the election was stolen by the Democrats and by Joe Biden. Something that is completely false and was a narrative pushed by Donald Trump and by right-wing conspiracy theorists. There's also a big part of it is QAnon, which we've talked about before, where they literally think the Democrats and Hollywood, which is very kind of anti-Semitic in there too, if you kind of read between the lines of the type of people they're talking about, that they are a satanic pedophile baby eating ring, and that Donald Trump was sent by God to put a stop to it. And if he leaves office without any kind of evidence, remember their whole thing was you're going to wake up and Hillary Clinton's going to be in jail, Barack Obama's going to be in jail, George Clooney's going to be in jail because they're part of this pedophile ring. It's going to be the Great Awakening where everyone believes in this crazy conspiracy because the results are going to be manifest. Well, they've had 4 years and it hasn't happened. And if Trump gets kicked out, that kind of kills their whole theory. I'm sure cognitive dissonance being what it is, they'll come up with some other explanation of why it didn't happen. But that would destroy their entire worldview. So their response to that is no, Donald Trump has to be president so we get another 4 years to make this happen. Because a lot of these people have destroyed their family, destroyed their lives to follow this crazy conspiracy, and they don't want to have to deal with reconciling that if it doesn't look like it's going to happen.
And I agree with that too. I think my big issue is the idea of trying to find a gotcha with some kind of liberal hypocrisy here. And I have a couple issues with it. One, when we're talking about how you talk about intent and things like that, we literally had the largest civil rights movement in the entire country's history, if not the entire world's history. Whatever our leaders and representatives did nothing to stop what would have happened. And I'm talking about the tens of millions of people who peacefully marched. It wouldn't have mattered because this is what happens when you have the world's largest civil rights movement. Yeah, so when we're talking about people who are trying to quote mine Democrats and say that they were trying to egg on these violent rioters, this is in context of the world's largest civil rights movement, which you can't ignore that. Compare that to the Capitol riots, where it was literally just talking to this crowd of people to send them to the Capitol and have them commit violence. I think that's a huge distinction. And so for me, at the end of the day, it has to go back to we need to denounce rioting wherever it is. And that's what happened with the BLM riots too, right? We had over 4,400 people who were arrested for rioting during Black Lives Matter marches. And good, fine. If you're going to destroy things and break the law, get arrested. That's kind of my whole idea with even civil disobedience. If you're going to peacefully protest, even for civil disobedience purposes, but still break the law, then you should be arrested because that's the whole point of civil disobedience.
I would love to live in a world where civil rights does not require
any rioting,
right? Protests and riots, if you want to call them that. But that's the world we live in. Look at the suffrage movement in the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
Look at
Stonewall.
Look at Martin Luther King in the 60s. Rosa Parks. Look even to India and Gandhi and their struggle to be free of British colonization. None of those things just happen because a lot of people want it and because it's the right thing to do and because history will someday be on your side. It does require getting the attention of the majority of people who are just living their lives and not really paying attention to what other people are struggling with. It would be nice if all we would need to have happen is, hey, sometimes police are way too aggressive and they treat minorities poorly and they violate their civil rights. Can we stop that? Oh yeah, we'll look into that. Thank you for bringing that up. We'll be sure to re-educate everyone and reform the police department so that you're not being oppressed. Let's sign up for that if we can do it, but unfortunately that's not what happens. And when the same things keep happening over and over again, that does breed anger and distrust and resentment. And those things do boil into violence sometimes. But yes, you can still say that violence is still wrong. Your voice does need to be heard, but we don't need to, again, bring more pain into the world if the end result that we're going for is less. Bringing more hurt is not going to solve anything, even though I do understand why that, there is so much anger and there is so much resentment towards injustice. I can't say that about the Capitol rioters. They're just deluded conspiracy theorists who believe in some kind of alternate reality. We have video evidence of George Floyd being murdered by a police officer who had no care for his well-being at all and basically just watched him die. And we all watched him die. What evidence is there that votes were stolen from Donald Trump? They've had 60 court cases. That's a lot more court cases than George Floyd got. And he's lost every single one of them. They've had every avenue to prove any kind of conspiracy, any kind of malfeasance. And they've failed to do so because it never happened. That's the difference that I see and the problem that I have with the Capitol riots versus Black Lives Matter.
And one thing I also wanted to add is a typical conservative tactic is to use whataboutism as a reason to not care about the problem that's currently facing us. So, I mean, if you think about other examples of this type of tactic, you may hear things like, well, if you think women are being treated unfairly here, what about women in the Middle East? Or if you think people of color are poor here because of systemic racism, what about all the poor white people? Same thing with, if you think the Capitol riots are bad, what about the BLM riots?
And to that, I say, yes, we need to do a lot more to improve the lives of poor Americans. And we also need to examine our relationship with Saudi Arabia and all of their civil rights violations and actually hold them accountable.
Well, and
then also fix systemic racism in our country.
Well, this is where I want everyone who's listening to this to hold their families and friends accountable when they use this type of whataboutism, where all you have to really do is ask them, so are you really telling me you don't want this country to be better? Because that's it, right? Because this is a reason to not care about the issue. They don't actually want to fight against your point. They want to not care about the issue because that's what conservatives do. The idea is to conserve the status quo. And then we know that from a psychological perspective that conservatives will not want to care about these issues because any time they have to care about it, it will be changing that status quo. So they'll give you whatever reason they can think of, even if it means diminishing the problem at hand to preserve that status quo. So force them to admit that they want the country to be better. Otherwise, throw away their complete argument because it's nonsense. And to me, that's how I see this whole thing here with comparing the BLM riots to the Capitol riots, where all this is just more conservative whataboutism to not care about the insurrection that happened at our Capitol building.
It was all Antifa. Still hear that.
Still hear it today. Next in headlines, a story I never thought I would have to talk about is the $3,000 a month toilet that taxpayers are paying. Jason, did you hear about this?
Not before you just told me before we started recording, no.
Well, according to a new Washington Post article, the United States taxpayers have paid more than $100,000 to rent out a special place to go to the bathroom while defending Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner outside their house. Because I cannot stress this enough, they refuse to let them go to the bathroom in their house.
Well, they're the help, right? We give them a bucket.
I want to read a little bit from this article because it's just amazing.
Yeah, I know you're willing to take a bullet to save my life, but there's a gas station a couple blocks away.
So from the article, and I quote, instructed not to use any of the half-dozen bathrooms inside the couple's house, the Secret Service detail assigned to President Trump's daughter and son-in-law spent months searching for a reliable restroom to use on the job, according to neighbors and law enforcement officials. After resorting to a porta potty, as well as bathrooms at a nearby home of former President Barack Obama and the not-so-nearby residence of Vice President Pence, the agents finally found a toilet to call their own. But it came at a cost of U.S. taxpayers. Since September 2017, the federal government has been spending $3,000 a month, more than $100,000 to date, to rent a basement studio with a bathroom from a neighbor of the Kushner family.
How bad of people do you have to be worse than Mike Pence?
Trump bad. You need to be Trump bad because Trump is the worst of all people. Trump is literally like Disney supervillain level of like evil, rich, bad guy.
He was the villain of like every movie in the 80s. They were all just weak allusions to Trump. Even that Wonder Woman movie that just came out, the villain is basically Trump. We knew it. I don't know how he ever got elected president.
Because this is America and we're stupid. And your money has literally been paying for a toilet. So cool.
Do you think they get a cut from the neighbor?
Do they get a cut?
Yeah, keep not letting him use your bathroom and I'll give you like
10%.
Give you wet your beak a little bit.
That sounds so ludicrous. but I can't rule it out as a possibility because I've heard so much dumber. And finally tonight,
Speaking of dumber,
oh
somehow,
my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. Favorite representative of the show, Georgia's Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, QAnon specialist, an all-around crazy woman, has said via tweet, of course, that she will file articles of impeachment against Joe Biden on his first day of office.
yeah, it makes sense. Trump rightfully gets impeached a couple times, so now I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't present articles of impeachment literally every day. And that's fine. It's probably the best use of her time. If you've ever heard her speak.
Oh, it's awful. It's so bad.
It's literally, what if we elected QAnon Twitter to the House of Representatives? And that's what we get.
And let's be real about something. Nothing's going to happen out of this. Nothing at all, because this is just absolutely stupid and bonkers crazy. Nothing can get past with this. But I had to bring it up in this because it was just amazing that she got so triggered by the impeachment, saying, I'm going to have my own impeachment. You'll see.
Did you see her speaking during the impeachment hearing?
I did, unfortunately, where she had a censored mask on.
Yes, an elected representative of the United States, one of the most powerful people in the world, whose words echo all across the country.
I mean, we're talking about it right now.
Had a censored mask, as if somehow she is being silenced.
These people are so stupid. They are so dumb, and they lead our country.
It's the best we have to offer. How many people did you see were wearing masks incorrectly, too, during that hearing? It's just so embarrassing as a human.
We'd even talk about how Republicans raged against the fines that Democrats put forth to have them wear masks in Congress.
3 different representatives have caught COVID since sheltering with unmasked Republicans during the riot. There's video of aides trying to give masks to Republicans and them being like, ha ha ha, no, thank you, I don't want that. You're in a closed room with a bunch of people. You're all 100 years old because we keep electing grandparents to be our leaders for some reason.
But they're so wise, Jason. They're so wise. They know the best stuff.
Hopefully everybody gets better that is currently infected due to the negligence of one specific political party in our country.
These people are insane, man.
And how many people in their own districts have lost family members due to COVID, and they still show no regard? That's sickening.
Running against the worst candidate in the history of presidential politics puts pressure on me. Could you imagine if I lose my whole life? What am I going to do? I'm going to say, I lost to the worst candidate in the history of politics. I'm not going to feel so good. Maybe I'll have to leave the country. I don't know.
On to our main segment.
Shut up.
Freedom of speech.
My free speech.
And big tech. We have more freedom of speech right now than the president does, Joe.
Oh my God. I love my Twitter account. You have no idea. You know what I also love?
I never use it personally. If you see Think Progressively tweet, which you probably don't, nobody does, that's Joe. That is not me.
It's my outlet, man. Yeah, I absolutely love my Twitter account. I love my Facebook account. Don't have an Instagram account.
Me neither.
I don't have a Pinterest account, but if I did, I'd love it.
No. I hate Pinterest because sometimes when I'm looking for things and I want to know, it's usually like looking to like build something or make something, and I want like plans, and I'm like, oh, here it is, and I click on it. It's like Pinterest, and I don't know, it's just a picture, and I can't tell what, like, there's no other information. I hate Pinterest. I'm old. I don't know how to use it, but I do work in IT. I usually can figure stuff out. I can't see what use Pinterest has.
You're not a suburban mom.
I guess
you don't
not.
get it, man. So if you haven't heard, because you're not on social media or for whatever reason you don't have any access to the internet, Trump got banned from almost all social media accounts, and it's amazing.
For inciting the violent uprising that happened last week.
So Facebook and Instagram actually were the first ones to do. I think we talked about that in the last episode where Mark Zuckerberg put out an entire little post about it. Twitter then came on fully and to permanently delete Trump's Twitter account full of 80 million people following him, which makes me so happy that it's gone. I don't know if you saw this, but there was a picture going around on Facebook that now Trump can't see of his Twitter account being made into a cake, and it's just literally just a sheet cake of someone eating into a sheet cake that has like picture of President Trump Twitter account being suspended. It's amazing. It's so delicious.
Can't say I saw that one.
Oh, well, fine, whatever. Other places that banned him were Pinterest, Shopify, Twitch, and a couple others.
So you can't watch Trump's Let's Play videos anymore on Twitch?
Nope. Can't find his recipes for banana bread anymore. Sorry, like it's Trump. Big Mac of bread.
So this has started a call among conservatives
As expected.
to denounce big tech and to ask the question if they are wielding too much power and they are somehow violating our president's freedom of speech.
Well, it also comes from talking about Parler, right? It's not just about Trump getting his Twitter account suspended. I mean, there was also a bunch of other Twitter accounts that got purged from Twitter, but like those were all like bots and QAnon crazy bots who were threatening violence. And who were also, by the way, planning another riot and attack on Twitter, which is why they got suspended permanently. But so you also have places like Parler, which was at least the most widely used conservative platform.
It's conservative Twitter.
Right. And immediately Google Play and Apple threatened to take it off. Google Play took it off first, then Apple took off their Apple Store. And then after a little while, Amazon's web service actually took Parler down completely, basically just shutting them down.
That is their web host.
Yes. So now you have not only our president's Twitter account, which was suspended, you have these big tech companies who basically shut down an entire company over this type of stuff. And of course, you have Republicans freaking out like crazy Karens like they are. But we do have some concerns we want to talk about. I mean, you do have some people who are generally concerned about this from a good, rational perspective. So you even have foreign leaders who are talking about this, like Germany's Angela Merkel, who are actually calling the eviction of Trump a little bit problematic. I do want to read from her spokesperson here. Quote, "This fundamental right can be intervened in, but according to the law and within the framework defined by legislators, not according to a decision by the management of social media platforms. Seen from this angle, the chancellor considers it problematic that the accounts of the U.S. president have now been permanently blocked." So, I mean, she's arguing from the fact that this should be a government issue and not a free market issue.
Socialized Twitter?
I mean, that's probably a part of the topic, right?
Everybody's free. China has their own, Weibo.
Right.
And they get along fine by, basically restricting access or banning access to Twitter. If the government wanted to create a socialized social network, they could do it.
Well, what about actually turning like things like Twitter and Facebook into public utilities?
But is it right? Right now, Twitter and Facebook are used across the world.
Yep.
Who gets control? Whose rules are going to be there? Is it going to be a country like Austria who outlaws Holocaust denial? Is it going to be the United States? Is it going to be the UN? Is it who gets to decide the rules for a worldwide service?
And I think that's one of the big issues here. I mean, let's start with the real basics, right? Is this an actual freedom of speech issue? Jason, give us your super in-depth answer.
Okay, so my take on all of this
I thought you were just going to say no.
is, does the First Amendment cover these cases? And I think the easy answer there is no. That is not.
And that's open and shut.
Yeah, there's no, it literally just says Congress shall make no law. It doesn't say anything about Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey shall make no rule that the president can't tweet.
Well, I mean, even if you take like their logic to its logical conclusion, I mean, you're essentially taking away a business's right to then host whatever speech they want on their own company's platform.
And it's not like these companies are making this decision out of any kind of altruism. They're trying to cover themselves
Legally.
So we saw what happened last week on the 6th during the Capitol riots. 5 people died. Many people got injured.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that seemed to be motivated by what the president posted on Twitter, not just that day, but all leading up to that, all inciting the crowd. And there's a lot of evidence that a lot of the coordination was done on social media platforms.
Correct.
Leading up to that. They can be held responsible for not doing enough to stop those types of things.
Well, and for the record, if Republicans get what they want and get rid of Section 230, which is, I think we talked about this before from like a Verge article, which would make all social media companies completely liable for everything they post or everything that's on their website. All of this would have been brought up against Facebook and Twitter, rendering them
and
like,
it still
shut
can
down.
be. So
Even with 230.
Right.
Yeah.
they are not immune from, like, if I make a bunch of death threats to someone on Twitter and I get reported and then nothing happens and then I later kill that person, Twitter's getting sued.
Correct.
Because they didn't do anything. So with the inauguration coming up and with the threat of violence still very real to the point where we're boarding up windows in Madison and sending out the Wisconsin National Guard out there, DC is going to be a sea of National Guard and military during the inauguration, which is a shame. But that's the reality of it. Twitter is trying to protect themselves by banning Trump, by not letting him incite more violence. Because he's proven over and over again that when given the opportunity, he does not rein himself in. And his supporters are so fanatical that they have shown that they will kill in his name. And you better bet that when something happens and there's civil lawsuits involved, they're going to go after these social media companies. They have trillions of dollars. They're going to be held liable, or at least need to defend themselves in court, which is expensive. So they are merely doing this to cover themselves. That's why Amazon got rid of Parler. There's already, because Parler sued Amazon over losing their hosting there.
Yep.
And there's already documents that have come out in that suit, because everything is public, that show they've been warning them for months about them not doing anything
To moderate anything at all.
and they gave them over a dozen examples of Amazon executives being threatened that nothing was done. Only, just even their own company. So they will definitely win their suit against Parler because they have warned them and they didn't do anything to stop it. They are under no obligation to host hate speech and be a place that you can use to organize violence.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like, let's take their conclusion to the logical end here. You're then arguing for our government to say to Amazon, no, you have to do business with this Nazi hate group.
And that
You
literally
have to do it.
has happened. The Daily Stormer lost their hosting. I think it's been about a year and a half maybe. And they had to find some, offshore place to host their Nazi propaganda. So if you can say the Daily Stormer does not have a right to be on any specific host that they want, then I'm sorry, neither does Parler.
No.
And for anybody wondering, like, oh, they can just find another host, that should be pretty easy. The issue and the reason why they're not back up already is Amazon Web Services, they don't just do hosting. They do security. They do authentication. They have all sorts of integrations. You basically would write your application specifically for them if you're going to use, because, they're expensive. It's not cheap to use that. So very likely they will have to rewrite their application for whatever new host.
I mean, this is why the Parler CEO basically said that after Amazon had them go dark, this was basically it for Parler.
Yeah, as you know it, certainly, because if they're going to continue, they're basically going to have to start from scratch. And that's their problem for not moderating hate speech and death threats made on their platform. And that's conservative speech these days.
Well, and that's okay. You just brought up a really good point here, is that conservative speech is not being censored on social media. No one's getting censored for talking about trickle-down economics. No one's being censored for talking about limited government. That's not happening.
Family values.
Right. I mean, for God's sakes, no one's being censored for talking about religion. Are you serious? They're being censored because they're harassing people. They're talking about violence against other people, and they're planning riots. That's where these are coming from. And in a lot of other cases, it's talking about spreading misinformation about trying to spread crazy riots, like things like QAnon, where they actually had to say, if you're a QAnon account, we're going to ban you because it's so dangerous. But we're not canceling Republicans. We're not canceling conservatives for just talking about being typical conservatives. It's not happening.
Now, there is another question of, are the tech giants too big and do they wield too much influence?
Which I think is a legitimate question.
Definitely. Amazon needs to be broken up. Amazon Web Services should be their own company. We need to regulate Facebook and Twitter
And Google.
and actually decide what we want, how we want our data, which is how all of these, you gotta remember, they're quote unquote free because they traffic in us.
Yep.
All of our data, what we do, where we are, what we search for, who we interact with.
That's how they make money.
Yes. And we are a product that they sell to everyone. And that is dangerous. And I'm all for regulating that. And that is a progressive idea that the tech industry needs to be reined in and there needs to be government regulation over it. That is not a conservative agenda.
Well, and actually, in a most weird way, it almost is. Where you are seeing Republicans actually like going so far to the right and stupid that they are saying we should regulate these companies just for the dumbest reasons possible.
Well, they want to regulate what they see as liberal companies.
Correct. But they're still coming to like almost the correct conclusion by the dumbest means in this one particular instance.
Because it impacts them, just like,
Like no one cares about COVID until it impacts them.
well, and what we saw with the metal detectors.
Yep.
It's only a problem once it inconveniences me.
But Republicans aren't selfish. What are you talking about? But I think this is a real big issue we need to discuss and look at further. I mean, there's no way that this can be sustainable, in the next 20 years. There's absolutely no way without us having to do anything to regulate these companies. Their power would just be completely amassed where we are literally just an Amazon and Google country. And that's all it is.
Don't forget about Disney.
And Disney.
Yes, we need to actually do what has been done to great effect in our past, which is actually break up monopolies.
So, Jason, here's something I want to talk to you about. So you hear things a lot where someone will say, okay, so this isn't a free speech issue in reference to like the government or legally speaking, but I want to talk about the principle of free speech. I'm just upset that people are upset that so-and-so got banned from Twitter, even though it's not an actual legal issue. What are your thoughts on that?
The bar is generally much lower on these companies' terms of services than it is for criminal action. The company is free to decide how they want to regulate what happens on their platforms. And again, they're not doing it because they're altruistic, because they care really about what people say on their platform. They're just worried about what their liability is. So they take steps to try to minimize that as much as they possibly can. If your child gets harassed by other children online and kills themselves, your lawyer is going to want to sue the social media platforms. That has happened. That's why these companies take these steps where, they have anti-harassment terms of services. And if you violate that, they are free to react however they would like. That is the way our country handles businesses. You can be refused service. Hate speech is not a protected class. Everyone keeps wanting to compare this to gay wedding cakes. Sexual preference and sexual orientation are protected classes. You cannot discriminate based on someone's sexual preference. You can discriminate based on someone's political preference. Ideologies are not identities. That is not a foreign concept. That's not a new concept. And incitements to violence has never been protected, even by the First Amendment.
Well, let's also talk about the fact that people are only get upset because these are public figures who are getting banned from these areas, right? Where Twitter and Facebook ban people, hundreds if not thousands of accounts every single day.
Every minute, probably.
Right. And you don't see people going insane and crazy about that. It's because they're okay with those standards. So if we're going to talk about actually having real free speech on these platforms, you also have to talk about having free speech as far as pornography, Nazism, things like that. Actual real like KKK stuff. And if you're not okay with those people also having a chance to spread their information on Facebook and Twitter, then you're just being a hypocrite. And that's all this is. And even if you are saying, okay, fine, let anyone have, any type of free speech they want on these platforms. We have to force Facebook to put whatever people have or wherever they want to post. And then it's just an absolute free for all, right? A libertarian's wet dream. We're already seeing it doesn't work. We already talked about in our last episode about the dangers of conspiracy theories, that these conspiracy theories are traveling faster than real information. The consequences of having this logic be fulfilled is that we'd have a worse society for it. or a worse platform for it. When you look at things like 4chan and Gab, hell, even they have terms of service because they can't just have an absolute free-for-all, because that would be insane.
Think of how many trolls there are on the internet, how much there are people that just want to push boundaries no matter what. And if you're not strict with what's acceptable, it's going to get real ugly real fast. Look at any YouTube video's comment section.
Right. And I think to finish it out, I really want to talk about this article from The Skeptic, which is a UK-based magazine. And the article is called The Curse of Monster Island, a 4-year experiment in unmoderated free speech by Aaron Rabinowitz. And basically what he did, and this was an unscientific experiment where he wanted to find out, as a philosopher, what would happen if he had a place that had untethered free speech, a place that people can go to and actually exchange ideas and have the real market of ideas to actually convince people of what their beliefs are and what they should be. Within 4 years, it got so bad that he had to leave because it was nothing but trolls and alt-right Nazi propaganda. Because at the end of the day, even his untethered free speech haven had to have some kind of regulations and modifications in place. Otherwise, the whole thing wouldn't have been able to be stable to begin with. You would have people who would do things like dox other people, threaten other people continuously, spam other people, and it made for a completely unenjoyable environment for everyone. So after 4 years of running this Facebook group of untethered free speech, his biggest lesson that he learned was that the best places for actually having communication and real civil discussion and real civil dialogue is to have really good, strong, stringent, and enforced moderation. That's how you have environments where real civil dialogue can take place. Otherwise, you're just going to have a complete show of whatever people want to do and say just to screw with things.
One of the quotes that I like from the article talking about what happened after they built this Monster Island says, the result was several years of the purest banality of evil. We ended up needing to add rules against doxing, blocking admins, explicit threats of physical violence, and taking photos from people's personal profiles and photoshopping them into sex acts with military dictators. So even the site that their entire purpose was to have no rules
had to have rules.
Any kind of discourse was not possible without some of the barest guidelines. And eventually things would keep getting worse. They had to start kicking people for posting like horribly racist material. And they had to keep making rules. And eventually it just got to be too much to administer, and Aaron had to just walk away.
And if you guys remember from our conspiracy theory episode last week, the best solution to fight this type of stuff is pre-bunking, or to limit the exposure of the conspiracies or bad beliefs to begin with. Deplatforming is a good thing. Yes, it should be done within moderation, right? Yes, it should be done with all eyes on them, criticized heavily. I'm okay with that. I have no problems with trying to figure out where the line should be, because it is a very thin line to balance on. But we have to have this type of stuff if we want to live in a better civilized society. There's no other way around it. If you are arguing for untethered free speech on social media accounts, you are arguing for the literal devaluing of the dialogue on those platforms, because that's how this works in reality. We've seen it in research articles. We've seen it with this article about Monster Island. And we literally saw it with Trump. So when your libertarian friend or family member starts to tell you that we need to have a good marketplace of ideas, tell them that it literally does not work in reality, because people don't think rationally. If marketplace of ideas worked, we would not have Trump as president.
In a real market, you still have to get a permit and set up a stall. You don't just let anyone sell anything. Otherwise, you get eBay.
So yes, we should still have free speech from the government, but it's okay to have our speech regulated by people who want to have what's on their platforms be reasonable. That's totally fine. And it's also okay to say there's a big problem with big tech having as much power as they do, while also saying that it's idiotic to say that this is a free speech issue with big tech.
And if you want to hear more from Aaron Rabinowitz, you can check out his podcast, Philosophers in Space, that he hosts with friend of the show, even if he doesn't know we exist, Thomas Smith.
And if you don't hear from us, it's because we got canceled.
Damn big tech.
Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. God damn it. Now I'm so Southern. Oh, yeah, he did.
Yes, he did.
Boy, did he.
Oh, shucks.
Damn. I don't even know how to respond to it without making myself laugh.